You are tuning into the Lehigh Low Ego, High Impact Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Volkan Emre, along with a dynamic team of Kellogg School of Management alums. We are here on a shared mission to uncover the mindset that drives impact and success. On Lehigh, we have thought-provoking conversations with incredibly successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, and investors from around the globe. We uncover the mindset that drives them, allowing them to make a high impact without losing themselves to ego. Now, let's get started with today's episode. In this episode, we are hosting Robin Manthie. Robin is an accomplished nonprofit executive who is currently leading the Kitchen Coalition at Second Harvest Heartland, one of the nation's largest food banks. Second Harvest is distributing more than 100 million pounds of food to community food shelves, meal distribution sites, and emergency grocery pop-ups in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Kitchen Coalition was launched during the COVID-19 pandemic and has delivered more than 5 million of meals in just over 4 years by partnering with local businesses and nonprofits to distribute culturally relevant and nutritious food. Robin's career includes marketing and strategy roles at General Mills, Feeding America, Boston Consulting Group, and 3M. She holds an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. With her passion for using food to connect and uplift communities, Robin has turned Kitchen Coalition into a lasting and impactful program. She lives in Minneapolis with her family. I'm co-hosting this episode with my wife, Beth Loken. At one point in her career, Robin was actually Beth's boss. We are recording this podcast in the Kitchen Coalition's headquarters in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Robin, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and hosting us today at your office. So it's an honor and privilege to have you on the podcast with Beth. Thank you, Beth, for joining me.
Of course.
For the listening audience, Beth is my dear wife, and we have been together for almost 15 years. So, beautiful day in Minnesota. Robin, we have some warm-up questions to get us all warmed up for this podcast, and we will be firing away them when you are ready.
Sounds great.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Right answer. Dogs or cats?
Neither. I am not an animal person.
No
I care
pets?
about humans, no pets.
No pets.
Okay. Mountains or beaches?
I'd say mountains. Get out, see things.
Any favorite mountain?
Spend a lot of time outside of like Denver with my sister who lives out there.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
Text or call?
Text. A little time to respond, think about things.
Millennial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
Music or podcast?
I'm a music person. I can't listen to a podcast and do anything else.
Oh,
So
okay.
music and multitask.
Mac or PC?
PC, I guess I'm not cool.
Drive or fly?
A little of both, but I guess I'm going to go fly.
Fly. Okay.
So what's worse, dishes or laundry?
Absolutely laundry.
Okay.
Just the process, the folding.
Okay. Wow. I'm really. Most of the people say laundry so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, the process, right?
And there's so much more of it.
Okay.
With kids for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the first app you open up in the morning?
Email. Work, email, like you're absolutely not supposed to. Secondarily, the weather app, because that's the first thing my children ask me when they get up. What's it going to be? What should I
The
wear?
clothing choices.
That is the first thing our daughter asks me every morning as
Yeah.
well.
Is it a t-shirt day, a tank top day, a long sleeve day?
Pants or skirt.
Yeah, and the question I get is, can I watch something while I'm having breakfast? Like, that's
Yeah. Mom versus dad.
Once you're dressed. That's I'm
Yes.
like, get your clothes on.
yeah. Robin, Can you start by giving our listeners a brief intro to your background and your journey to becoming the managing director of Kitchen Coalition?
Yeah. I would say I have two passions. One is community building and one is creating structure in what I do. So my mom was a teacher. My dad was a woodworker. I went to a liberal arts college. So these were things that were there. But when I had my first jobs at like Target and General Mills, it was this magical moment where I was like, oh, other people like list making and structure and meetings and whiteboards, and they want to train me on how to do this and do it better. And so that was kind of what I joke with like my family. I kind of like rebelled by being corporate, was like a unique thing for my background. So I went into marketing. I loved the customer first mentality of it. And I loved seeing like a product. So my granola bar on the shelf and getting market share in that competition. But the thing I realized was I needed to care deeply about what I was selling. And I didn't always like feel that in the corporate world. So while I loved the structure of it, that's what led me to my first nonprofit role at Feeding America. I went as an intern. So I was a full-time marketer at General Mills, and then I accepted this like internship at Feeding America. And that was my first thing. I ended up there for about 2 years in different roles in cause marketing and other areas. But once again, then you see people who have been, our CEO at the time had been the CMO at Delta Airlines, and she had this great skill set that I wanted. So like many other people, I decided to get my MBA to do that, and then bounced around a few other roles that also built skill sets. So Boston Consulting Group, 3M, Kellogg kind of helped build that, but I was always telling people I wanted to go back to the social sector. And so every move I had the conversations about what that might look like. And so when the job to run what's now Kitchen Coalition came up, I had 5 people who were like, oh, there's this thing and it's happening and the person's just about to leave and it'll get posted. You should consider this. So that's kind of how like the path came to be. And I then during COVID made the jump to really come back to the social sector and into what I'm doing right now.
So people might not be familiar with Kitchen Coalition. So if they're not, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Kitchen Coalition and what Kitchen Coalition does?
Yeah. So Kitchen Coalition is one of kind of the bright spots of the pandemic. So it was this moment where over a week, we were thinking about building our own commercial kitchen. I'm sitting at a food bank. So my work is housed within Second Harvest Heartland, which is a food bank. And we were going to build our own kitchen to make meals for people. But over a weekend at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down, a local chef, Liz Mullen of Chelgro's Catering, called us and said, hey, you guys are going to build a kitchen, but I have an empty kitchen, refrigerators and freezers full of food, and you guys have a lot of people who need meals right now. If we cook the food, will you get it out? There was a meeting on a Saturday. They made 500 meals by Wednesday, ramped up to about 10,000 a week very quickly. So this model was born of taking rescued and donated ingredients to for-profit restaurants and caterers, turning it into meals, and then getting it out to nonprofits that eventually got it to neighbors who needed meals. It was a crisis response. When I came in, I tried to figure out why does this need to exist long-term? Because it's much more expensive, of course, to turn groceries into meals than to just give people groceries when they are food insecure. And that was really focusing on people have barriers to cooking. So our research determines about 15% of people don't have access to a kitchen, physical ability to cook, or are in a time of crisis or transition and need a meal. So we've continued this model in order to serve those folks. I guess for scale, we do about 25,000 meals a week. We've done 5 million in our first 4 years, and I've got 20 different kitchens that cook and about 100 different distribution partners.
And these numbers are in the state of Minnesota alone, right?
Yeah, those numbers are actually just for Second Harvest Heartland service area in Minnesota. We actually replicated the program. The model worked and it was unique, so we've replicated it down in Rochester, Minnesota, and then up in the Fargo, Moorhead, kind of North Dakota area at other food banks.
So you joined Kitchen Coalition in 2021. Is that right?
Correct.
That was a really pivotal time, sounds like, right? Pivoting from that crisis mode into building something more sustainable. So you've overseen that shift in business model, those expansions that you talked about, a rebrand, and you even had a Harvard Business Review case written up about you.
I know. I got to
Congratulations.
go be there and be the expert person when it was taught.
Yeah,
it
congrats.
was fun.
So take us back to that decision to join the role at that time. Like, what was going through your head? What kind of mindset did you feel you had to adopt at that time to jump into something like this?
It's a funny thing to admit to yourself, but I've always said I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm the first person an entrepreneur should hire. So I am a person, like I said, who loves to build the structure, to figure out how something's going to work, to make trade-offs. Maybe not the person who has that kernel of an idea and just keeps driving and driving and driving. I want to partner with that person. So I took over when this program had been going for a year to decide if it should continue and what would that look like. So that first question I already kind of mentioned was, is there an ongoing need beyond the pandemic? And the answer to that was yes, 15% of people need this meal. And when we added up who was already doing meals, it was maybe only half of the need was getting served. But then the second thing was, will it exist? So when I started, everybody's like, aren't the restaurants just going to drop you as soon as their business comes back? Because we pay them at cost. There's no profit. So they are breaking even on a variable basis by working with us. But it's basically like free cause marketing, right? They are doing something for the community while breaking even. And there's a lot of lumpiness in the restaurant business. There's always excess capacity. And so we found the model could exist. And so my mentality was, let's prove that it needs to exist and let's figure out how to make it happen. And so I did a lot of the stabilizing things of writing contracts and getting people to write down the standard operating procedures and figuring out what was within the bounds of, Feeding America's network, which is our umbrella organization as food banks of responsibility. So yeah, it was this kind of how do I stabilize something was definitely my mentality when I took over.
Did you feel intimidated by all that needed to be done?
Yes, before I got here. I would say when I was interviewing for the job, I kept thinking holy moly, it's going to be on me to decide this beast of a thing, because we went from not existing to being the same size as Meals on Wheels in a year. So you went from a total concept that wasn't out there to established organization size very quickly.
Wow.
And so that was, but as soon as I showed up, the magic of the organization I'm sitting in is freedom to make decisions. I mean, the number of contracts I signed and wrote in my first 6 months here is insane. And there was light oversight, but I had so much freedom to just make things happen. So
then you became almost an entrepreneur too, in that sense.
Yeah, a mid-stage entrepreneur. I mean, I joked at the time we were toddlers. Mm-hmm. And then when we were really getting into standard operating procedures and making tough decisions, we were maybe in elementary school. I'd say we're in high school now. We're pretty stable on our production and distribution side. And a lot of what we're focusing on is financial sustainability and viability long term. I mean, it costs $8 to $9 million to keep this program running, and that's all donation based, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to have our stable set of backers to keep us going that are invested in the mission.
Do you guys have only one location, this location, or do you have multiple locations in terms of the on our way to this meeting, you showed us the warehouse and how things are actually functioning over here. Is this the main base location, and do you guys have other similar locations across the state?
So this is the warehouse of Second Harvest Heartland's food bank for all of the Twin Cities, actually 59 county area across Minnesota and into Wisconsin. So this is the only major warehouse. My team, I actually don't even have an office because I spend most of my time in the field. So I come in and I find space here to sit when I'm here. But my team technically is headquartered out of here. And then our partner food banks down in Rochester, Minnesota, up in Fargo, North Dakota, will have a similar building to what we're sitting in here that is the warehouse situation. But then we're an extremely partnership-based, we say partnership, not ownership. So we have the 20-plus production kitchens where we're using, a little bit of time at FEMA's restaurant downtown to do some cooking, or at Afro Deli in St. Paul to do the production. And then the nonprofits we partner with, a lot of them are, about half of them don't do food as their main mission. So it's a daycare or a mental health clinic or a stable housing stabilization that then is distributing our meals. So it's really partnership-based to get everything in, networked to get the food out.
Yeah, you can also count these partners into your location count.
Yeah.
In that sense, honestly. I think the restaurant business in general, this is a broad generalization, is one of the largest industries, businesses in the US, right? Maybe even top 3 could be after maybe healthcare and stuff. There's definitely, I think you guys have proof of concept over here, right? Which can then be potentially scaled up in the US context. So how do you feel about it? Do you have any aspirations to go beyond Minnesota?
We do. It's a mixed, our donors and our relationship, they value what we can do in this state, right? So we are both a very bound geographically, but also a member of Feeding America, which is kind of like the trade association for food banks. So I've actually, part of when we replicated the program down in Rochester, Minnesota, was basically creating a playbook or a tool of how you would actually do this at other places. So we have documented that, our contracts, how we do it, how we reach out, how we consider who's a fit. And I have, done keynotes at the Feeding America National Conference and all those things. So we're in the groundwork setting phase, especially for food banks that don't already have their own kitchen. So do aspire to grow and are making those connections if anybody's excited.
Let me pivot a little bit back to you personally and your career. So one thing the 3 of us sitting here have in common is we have a mix of nonprofit and for-profit experience in our backgrounds, which is fairly rare, I think, in the spaces we work. What have you learned and taken away from your time in nonprofit that you brought into your time in for-profit companies, and vice versa? What have you brought from those for-profit experiences back to nonprofit?
I call nonprofit, there's this warm embrace of mission-driven work. And for me, it's a beautiful feeling. But the thing you learn from that is the power of a common goal and the efficiency you get if everybody is excited about that, because people will do things that are, not totally in their self-interest. They will make compromises. They will show up beyond how they're asked to show up. And so that was something that I definitely took with me into the for-profit sector after having worked at Feeding America. And then coming back to the nonprofit sector now at the food bank, I would say the number one thing is how to sell something in. Just think about the value of writing an executive summary from consulting. Telling somebody, what's the situation? What did I do? What's my recommendation? And what's the impact in a very concise package is something that is extremely valuable in the nonprofit sector and not always trained. There's a lot of challenges with data and a mix of qualitative and quantitative, but no matter what you're working with, you should still package your idea. And that's something I've taken into the area.
Do you see a common thread weaving throughout your experience at these various organizations?
I'd say a desire for personal growth. So understand it, when I went into the corporate sector, I'd had a kind of a coach or, somebody in college who had said, go somewhere where they can afford to train you and give you access to opportunities. And I was in marketing, but I wanted to understand sales. And so I took like a 3-day sales course on how to go do things. And that was something that a company has the ability to sponsor you to do in a way that the nonprofit sector doesn't always have. And so I would say there's this like personal development trade-off with mission and trade-off with financial stability. So like I worked at corporations when I had kids and I paid off, my undergrad and my MBA. And so those were always like the three things, like learning, the mission of the work, and the financial stability, and how do you trade those off throughout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned when you were working in for-profit earlier in your career, when you were working in nonprofit early in your career, that the leadership seemed to come from the outside and come from corporations. Are you seeing that still the case across nonprofits? Do you think that's fair? Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, I dream of a world where a long-term nonprofit career is financially viable for anybody who's excited about it. And I think we as a food bank are trying to do a lot to make that possible. So also, we don't want people who work here to need our services. So we've been doing a lot of like market studies on what people need. So our minimum, salary for working in the warehouse or our hourly wage, I think, is like $21.50 or $22 is like the base, and then working above that. So, but when you compare that to what you could get in an entry level corporate position, we're still pretty darn far off. So I think it should be viable. I would have previously said that I'd say it's 50-50. The longer I'm in here, the more I realize 50-50 homegrown nonprofit bouncing around and folks who are coming as like the second career is getting earlier, kind of like me. It used to be second career meant like 50, 55, maybe even 60. Somebody comes and does nonprofit. I'd say a lot more people are coming at 40-ish like myself. But I have encountered a woman who I worked with at Feeding America. We were both kind of junior at Feeding America at the time. And when I presented at a Feeding America conference, she was there and she had stayed the whole time. And I was like, we kind of ended up in the same place. So like it is possible. I'd say it's like 50-50. Mm-hmm. And there's a financial trade-off.
Indeed. All right. So we haven't mentioned this yet, Robin, but you were actually my boss for a while. And you were a good one, to the point where people who worked for you at that time, we still talk about what a strong leader you were, what a good supervisor, the mix of kind of empathy and get things done that you brought to that role. In fact, I think a lot of us aspire, honestly, to be more like you. And so if I've never paid you that compliment, I want to do that today.
Thank you.
Just today, I actually sent someone a template that you had sent me like 4 years ago because I find it so useful. So talk to me about that. Like, how did you get good at that? What's your philosophy when it comes to leading people?
I would say my philosophy, and something they talk about in consulting that kind of helped me name it, is you can either give people a lot of space to grow into a role and then catch them or try to be there if they have a challenge or face something. Or you can be really up close and personal early on and like co-create in the first 90 days and then release, add responsibility as you go. If you can guess based on like, I like structure, I'm the latter. So I'm a person who I want to get to know you up front. I want to understand what you're hoping to do. I want to see a lot of your work and give you really constructive feedback and then release as you develop and grow and give you as much responsibility as you can handle. But for me, that's a way that I feel comfortable in managing somebody, and I've found you can identify a lot of things early on.
How has that changed for you? And I should note, you were my supervisor largely during a time of remote work where we were all forced to be remote. How has that kind of changed for you? To me, it's proof that you can lead effectively in a remote environment, but have you changed any of your philosophies as you've adapted to kind of leading more hybrid teams?
The number one thing is I think I demand a lot more to be written down. Like I missed whiteboards in remote, and I've now gotten like very comfortable basically like live whiteboarding on Excel or on PowerPoint or in Word documents. But I would say the biggest thing in remote for me is there's a lot more that gets written down. Like I need to see it. We can't just have the conversation, because if you don't have that like in person back to back and seeing the body language and understanding, sometimes you miss some of the cues about how much somebody is actually believing what they're saying. So I'd say that feels like the biggest change. I also am totally a video person. Like if I am on calls, like I am on video.
Me too. Yeah.
Robin, can you name a sliding door moment in your career that changed the trajectory of your professional journey?
Yeah, I will admit I had to Google what that meant. And I think to a moment I was sitting in a chair in LA talking to someone when I was a marketer about their thoughts on food and weight loss. And I loved it. I was excited. I was going to her pantry. I was learning. And it was this moment where I realized I really wanted to be not only making the thing happen in the world in a big way, but to have that personal connection with the product I was delivering. And so I use that kind of listening ethnography skill set when I'm sitting in an Islamic center having tea, or when I'm going out and doing a ride along and, delivering meals to folks in their homes and tents on the street. And so I think that was this crystallization of how close I wanted to be to my end product.
You probably feel good about like that sliding door moment and where you are right now.
Yeah. Having that moment in a place I felt pretty comfortable, right? Sitting in somebody's living room and then getting to explore that. I mean, I am constantly challenging my assumptions about what it means to be human in my work and what people's experiences have brought, whether you are here as a recent refugee, of which we have a lot right now, of newcomers in Minnesota, or you are somebody who's recently come out of incarceration. So one of my partners, somebody who is on the kitchen team, was in incarceration for 21 years, and this is his first job out. And so talking to him about that experience and the skills he learned working in the kitchen in the prison. So I think there's this beautiful moment of this job where you get to interact in a collaborative way with people who, in other parts of my career, I have not come into contact with.
It also gives you the opportunity to show you what the society is like made of, right? Not like to live in a bubble, but really see the real world like through the eyes of this impactful organization.
Yeah, we talked, the hip thing when I was in consulting was strengths-based feedback. And I think that's probably still a trend, and I fully support it, right? Because they say, like, you need 9 positive pieces of feedback to be able to absorb, like, 1 constructive piece. There's another part of my leadership strategy is, like, you do need to build people up about what they're great at. But similarly, we have to look at the work we do in the nonprofit sector based on assets, not just need. Like if you go in just thinking you're filling a need, you are doing a disservice. Like our success as a society is based on how we all function. And so we need to look at all of the assets, and we have to enhance the assets that exist in a community. And that's what my program does and why I love it so much. I am saying there are restaurants, there are nonprofits in these communities. I can bring in food and money, and they can process it and distribute it. A neighbor can cook it at a restaurant for their neighbor and get paid for that. So it's this asset-based or strength-based community building that I guess ties to my leadership style and is why I love my job so much.
And I think maybe secretly or not secretly efficiency, right? Because we are really truly talking about like an efficient throughput at the end of the day. Like it may be a business term, but really efficient use of resources with social impact. So that's really wonderful. So thank you for sharing the sliding door moments and where you are today.
Thank you.
So you talked about your leadership style, which I think has a pivot to mentorship, giving mentorship, constant proactive mentorship to the people whom you are like working with. But how about you in terms of receiving mentorship? Over the course of your career, have you had a mentor whom you worked with, and what type of impact that particular mentorship created for your career?
I've had a lot of amazing bosses and people I've like stayed in contact with from old jobs, but I don't know that I have somebody who I'd say has like been my mentor. It's always sounded like this very exciting yet elusive thing to me. Mm-hmm. So what I do have that's had longevity, I would say, is a group of peer women who I've either gone to school with or worked with who has kind of navigated our careers together. And so a couple of them I have like a every other week call. That doesn't always happen, but we talk about what we're dealing with. We give some advice on projects or life. And they've often like made connections to other folks. And so it's been kind of this like peer mentor network that's been really beneficial for me.
Another like network you were in at some point in your professional life was Kellogg. Mm-hmm. What prompted you to pursue your MBA at Kellogg, and what is the Kellogg impact on your professional and personal life?
So I would say when I went to Kellogg, I thought of myself as a classical marketer, which is, a product owner. So you're multifaceted, but I wanted to more understand the finance, the supply chain, like the product development side without actually having to do those jobs. And so I went to Kellogg, as everybody says, to build out my toolkit. And I got that. And also kind of elevated that marketing into somebody who could do strategy, which was my step into consulting. Beyond the skills, I went to Kellogg and brought my now husband, but my JV along with me to Evanston, and it was the first time we made like couple friends, like made friends as a couple, which is a magical thing. And it was this like development moment of both like professional and personal connection and growth. And I love Kellogg for that, right? I think that's what makes the network sustaining, is that it's not just a business network.
Oh, it's wonderful to hear that. By the way, the term JV has changed to supporter, I think, after COVID, at least in the executive MBA, I will say universe.
What did JV stand for?
Joint venture.
Joint venture. Now it's like supporter. Remember, like we had the supporter weekend.
Key supporter weekend.
Yeah, it was a key supporter, yes. And it used to be joint venture weekend, I think. Pre-COVID.
Very businessy.
So I have a question similar to what Beth asked about hardcore for-profit business in relation to nonprofit and vice versa. So people often associate business schools with for-profit businesses. And I'm curious about like how you have been leveraging the skill set that you developed at Kellogg in the nonprofit world in your role today.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no question that the MBA skills apply. So the ability to frame a problem, develop a hypothesis, do analysis, I do it all the time. And now I am responsible for teaching others who didn't have the same experience I've had. So like last week, I'm leading our strategic planning process for the food bank. And so I hosted an all-day workshop with our board, right? That involved, facilitating something, public speaking, using language that they could connect with, because you've got like a C-suite group of business leaders going through. Or just yesterday, I figured out kind of like a measurement plan for a pilot we're doing. And so it's the same skills plus. So the thing that is unique in this work is you have a blend of demand, right? When you're selling a product, you have demand, but we have need. And the people who have that need can't pay you for it. And so then you also have to raise donations or revenue, but they're two different things. And so I think an MBA plus somebody who's excited about getting to know communities that they're not familiar with and learning about, learning from them and understanding what you can bring, what assets we can help bring to bolster a community, right? That's what we're doing with investing food resources in a community. You can bridge those things. So we're still making and delivering a product, but we have the added element of you have to deliver a good product and you have to fundraise, and they come from two different stakeholders.
And I think in the industry, I have two comments like on yours.
Yeah.
You are doing it doing all of these things in a more resource limited environment is objectively harder. Plus, I think in your business, like in this business model, there's also the urgency, the time, right? Because you have these ingredients out there for a limited time period, and you will have to deliver them and bring them into final products. And not only that, then deliver these final products to the people like in need. Objectively, it's a very complex problem to solve in a relative comparison to like a for-profit like context, which is probably by default like more resource limited. So I really think that the MBA skill set plus, like as you said, it's great. And if you could go back in time, like say the start of your career, and give yourself an advice, what would that be?
I'd say just know, and this is something I tell a lot of people who I manage, like you cannot do your work on an island. You are responsible for identifying like what a problem is and having a hypothesis or a suggestion, but if you're not engaging other people to test that or to come in and help make it better, like you will not be successful and you won't enjoy your work. And in the for-profit sector, that was a lot of, peers or functions. Here now, that's a lot of people who have no idea what Kellogg even is, right? Like they're people who have come from totally different backgrounds. It's neighbors that use our services. It's people who have started a small nonprofit and may now add meals to their portfolio of what they offer. It's expanding a network. And so, the old saying is very true. Like you can go fast by yourself, but you can go far together. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm a person who's never met a whiteboard I don't like. So I always was good at engaging people, but I always felt a lot of ownership over solving something. And I think that's the advice. Like you are the owner of moving something forward, but you don't have to solve it alone.
I love that advice. I needed that advice today. So
Yeah.
I feel like I just had a meeting with my wonderful supervisor to share advice with me. Well, if people are interested in entering this field today, your field, nonprofit leadership, general management within this space, what do you rank as the most important thing they should consider?
I would say consider the work you like to do. Is it about the function or is it about the industry? And in this case, industry means mission. For me, it's about mission. I care about basic needs delivery, and I could do a lot of things and do a variety of marketing and operations and strategy and finance in my current role, kind of general management. But if you care about function, you have a lot more flexibility in the social sector. And then the second one, tied to what I was just talking about with not working on an island, is you're going to need a really different network than you probably have. So you either felt pretty uncomfortable in your business school experience because that was a new network for you, and maybe you already have a nonprofit diverse network. But if business school felt pretty comfortable, like you're going to need to get pretty uncomfortable and build a network of really small organizations and community organizers and, people who have different life experience than you to be successful and to give you feedback. They need to trust you to give you feedback on how you're performing the work that you're doing.
Robin, it's been so nice to chat with you again after a while. If people want to learn more about Kitchen Coalition or Second Harvest Heartland, what should they do?
Yeah, you can find us at the number 2, the word harvest.org/Kitchen Coalition. And there we have a really fun infographic, quick video that will walk you through how we work. You can find out more about us. And we would appreciate your support, as if you run a business that has food to donate and are in the area, that is always beneficial. Or if you can join us in financial support, it would be great to continue our mission. Thank you.
Robin, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful episode. So thank you very much for hosting us here at your office today. Thank you very much, Beth, for being a co-host today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. I appreciate you.
Thank you for diving deep with us on another episode of Lehigh, Low Ego, High Impact Mindset. Join us every week as we discover the stories, strategies, and insights that will empower you to grow personally and professionally. Stay inspired and catch you in the next one.